Wonderful. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on collectively creating an AI literacies community of practice. I am Lisa Campbell. I am our instruction and outreach librarian at the University of Florida, and I was the co-convener of our community of practice in the spring of 2024. And I was joined by my co-convener, who was a University of Florida library worker at the time, who has now moved on to UC Irvine as their digital scholarship librarian, and that's Tiffany Esteban. And I'm joined with three other of the community of practice members who are going to share their experiences as well. Hélène Huet, our European Studies librarian and the associate chair of our Humanities and Social Sciences library here at UF. April Hines, our journalism and communications librarian, and Sarah Tu, the project coordinator for the US Caribbean and Florida Digital Newspaper Project. So thank you all for attending. I recognize some of the names coming in, so I'm very excited that you've joined us today. Okay, so our agenda is we're going to share our community of practice model. We are going to talk about our experiences in the limited time that we have. We're going to share our resources with you. And if we have time, questions and answers, but you can always ask questions in the chat. And since there's so many of us here on the presentation, we can answer them there, maybe, while we're presenting. So yes, and feel free to say hello in the chat. Okay, so what is a community of practice? And it is groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. And this definition comes from Etienne and Beverly Wenger Trainer. They have coined the phrase and published on Community of Practice. The guide that I've linked here and all of our sites will be available through our institutional repository. So you'll be able to access these links afterwards. It is a very easy to read and understand overview of community of practices, talking about the domain, which is the topic of interest, the community, which is of course the group of people who are engaging in conversation, and the practice, which is the shared knowledge and resources that we're gaining through this experience. So I highly recommend you read that. And if you're really interested, there is an open access ebook on the topic where they really dive into forming this type of community. So I will tell you about our model that we did. Our purpose of our community was AI literacies. And it was to create a deeper understanding of artificial intelligence technologies and a shared language around literacies and pedagogies. And keep in mind, this was a year ago when at least generative AI was more of an emergent topic. So our hybrid model is different than what you might think of with hybrid because we weren't all online and in person at the same time. We actually alternated between in-person facilitated discussions and in online facilitated discussions that were virtual meetings once a month with in-person tea chats, which were informal conversations. Both of them were monthly. And so the facilitated discussions, we had pre-selected readings that we invited our members to read beforehand, and we had guided questions that we asked during the meeting. And then in our in-person informal space, it was just open discussion. We had refreshments, tea and snacks, and that's I think really where our core group formed, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But this model was co-facilitated by Tiffany and I actually highly recommend co-facilitation or co-leadership because it just helps everything. So our intentions for this practice was we wanted to provide opportunities to meet in person. We were really wanting to shift back to that human in-person interaction, I think, at that time. We recognize that members will be at various stages and have various interests and concerns, especially around this topic and especially around learning the ethical considerations. So we had people who were really excited and willing to engage with AI, and then we had some folks who had a lot of concerns and wanted to, talk about those before we really started engaging with the tools. So we wanted to make sure that members felt welcome and comfortable. So we made sure to invite members widely and then welcome them when they came into the online space or in person, and also make sure that they had an opportunity to share. We also wanted to be prepared for members who did not have the reading or had not done the readings, which is why we provided the questions so that we could facilitate conversation beyond the readings themselves. We wanted to provide multiple ways for folks to engage with the community and content. So that is also why we had all of the different types of modes to engage. We also partnered with our training program. We have a training program here within our libraries. And so we knew that by partnering with them, it would increase visibility of our community of practice and hopefully reach folks that were interested that we may not think to invite ourselves. And that also allowed us to provide the refreshments, which I recommend, and I'm sure by the end of this presentation, you'll find that this was key to the success of our practice, so our community. I do want to share the ground rules that we shared with the community of practice. We had 22 unique individuals come, but we had sort of like 6 core group members who came in person. But the ground rules were to share responsibility for including all voices in the conversation, to recognize that we are all learning and that we will all make mistakes, to understand that others will come to these discussions with different experiences from yours, and just be open to listening and learning from others. Okay, and with that, I will pass it to my colleague, Tiffany, who's going to talk about our first facilitated discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. So before I begin my section of this presentation, please bear in mind that this is based on what I remember from when I was still working at the University of Florida about a year ago. So it's most likely not comprehensive. And my intention here is to give you a general overview of the 4 topics of our community of practice, and to highlight some of the questions we engaged with based on what was generally happening at the time when we were all talking about AI. So as facilitators, Lisa and I wanted to explore what AI literacies meant in our own context as librarians and use the readings that we came up with to help us sharpen our perspectives. So when we started to outline what we wanted the community of practice to look like and what readings we were going to look at, we asked, were there any AI literacy frameworks already out there? Were they made by librarians or practitioners in other disciplines? How similar were those things to the ACRL information literacy framework, for instance? So was there something we could build on? And so our outline for the community of practice in the end started with the idea that AI literacy as a whole for us could be read as a subset of information literacy geared toward a particular set of technologies that exist under the large umbrella that is AI. Next slide, please, Lisa. So one of the main things we wanted to establish right off the bat, as one of the first topics we talked about, was ethics, especially when it comes to dealing with bias and discrimination, copyright, privacy, and labor. And because we framed approaches to AI literacies in this way, it allowed us to think about the connections between social and cultural critiques of AI tech and our own professional values as librarians. And at the time we were thinking through these things, I remember we were getting a lot of questions from faculty members. So whether students were using ChatGPT and if that was plagiarism, how to institute limitations around the use of AI tech in campus policy, broadly speaking, and then more specifically, if we had any statements or frameworks or just general language that the instructors could use for their course syllabi, among many other things. And I'm sure many of you in the audience have had similar experiences. So the ethics discussions in the community of practice centered on how much of the response we were seeing to AI tech at our university from educators focused on creating new regulation and ways of teaching, and to what extent our values as librarians could be translated into recommendations for that regulation, as well as new ways of understanding our own instruction practices. Next slide, please. And so that meant that much of our discussion on impacts was very timely. And in my opinion, there was a sense of urgency in how we approached these questions at the time. So we were most concerned with impacts on teaching information literacy and what role AI tech played in our teaching. So the larger question that we were asking was, do we teach how to use, evaluate, or question these tools? And so we looked to other departments on campus. So there was one that created a prompt engineering manual for teaching purposes, for example, among others, and to think through the way we manage classrooms in general, and the ways that we incorporated concepts from the field of digital pedagogy. So we talked about how useful these approaches were for the one-shot instruction model that we were using, and we asked questions like, if we use these tools for instruction planning, does that actually save us time or effort? If we teach students how to think critically about misinformation in the context of AI tech and the results that it generates, what does that look like when we only have about an hour to convey certain types of information? And then what do our learning outcomes look like if we incorporate the politics of citing AI generated content? Next slide, please. Which leads me to our last topic about pedagogies. And from what I can remember, both of our discussions on impacts and pedagogies were the parts of the whole community of practice where we very quickly drifted away from discussing any of the readings and really just talked about how to have more productive dialogue with the faculty and students we were in contact with regularly and answer all of these broad questions with short-term solutions. So especially this question of how do we practically incorporate AI literacies into library instruction? So in response to that, some of us held a workshop about what large language models, LLMs, are and how they function, for instance, or we experimented directly with ChatGPT in our classrooms and assessed the results, or we simply had a meeting with our department and we tried to work out how to divide the labor of all the different requests we were getting on using particular tools or teaching about AI, broadly speaking. And in this sense, the community of practice really became an informal space for us to really practice, as it were, and evaluate how well what we were reading and talking about applied to us individually. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to my colleagues who will talk in more detail about their experiences as participants.
Okay, so we asked our core group members four more facilitated questions or guided questions so that they could share their experiences. So I will share those with you and then turn it over. First being what motivated you to join the community of practice, two, what factors influenced your decision to keep participating. Can you share some key insights or lessons that you gained from this experience? And what advice would you give to others who are interested in joining or leading a similar group? And so we'll start with April.
Hi, everyone. I'm April Hines, and I'm the Journalism and Mass Communications Librarian here at the University of Florida. And I joined this community of practice for a couple of reasons. One being that I'm very much a learn by talking through kind of person. I knew, of course, I could do readings on my own and study up on AI, but I've always been the kind of person that enjoys going back and forth with someone about something that I'm learning. In graduate school, my favorite method of studying was I read a chapter and teach it to you, and then you read a chapter and teach it to me. So I felt like this would be a really great way to do that. I also really wanted to increase my knowledge base in a low stakes environment where I didn't feel like I was being judged, or I felt comfortable around some of my colleagues that I knew I could ask questions I might be afraid to ask in other environments. And I kept participating because I really appreciated the hybrid model, the ability to have more structured, facilitated conversations online, but then also to have the fun, casual tea chats over snacks that kept things fun and engaging and, you know, really made things interesting. And it was really helpful for me to discuss the pros and cons as well as the ethical issues. It really went a long way to enhance my AI literacy as I was working to help students develop theirs. And then in terms of key insights, I learned a lot more about the mechanics of how various AI tools worked. I know I've often said to students, like, I don't think that AI tool works the way that you think it does. And I had a lot of those misconceptions at first as well. Learning more from my colleagues about the back end of these AI tools and how they affected the front end really helped to enhance my understanding. And then I also walked away with, you know, when I joined this community of practice, I felt very much like Jennifer Lopez in Atlas in this photograph. I was intimidated, I was scared, I was confused, I didn't know quite what to think. And I was constantly sort of the what about person in these discussions, like, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or why is Microsoft Copilot giving me references from 1992? Or why is ChatGPT giving me a bunch of fake citations and annotations? And then through this community practice, I realized that it's okay to be the what about person. It's okay to be skeptical because that's really just a reflection of my information literacy skills that I've built up over all these years. You want to critically engage with information and you want to ask questions about where it's coming from. And then my advice, if you want to join a group like this or start a group like this, is the informal judgment-free zone is key. That's what kept me coming back. That's what made me feel comfortable and fostered a more productive learning environment. And that you really want to be okay with, depending on the conversations and where you are in your learning process, that sometimes you're going to be the learner learning from others, and sometimes you're going to be the teacher because you may have more advanced knowledge in a certain area. So I think a lot of us go to these things thinking that they're trainings and we're just going to sit and digest. But in a community of practice, again, sometimes you're the teacher, sometimes you're the learner. So just be prepared for that.
Thank you, April. And now, Alanuet.
Thank you. So I'm Hélène Huet. I'm the European Studies Librarian and the Associate Chair of our Humanities and Social Science Library at UF. My photo is not Jennifer Lopez. It's my, I think, 15th attempt at creating an AI photo. Originally, it was supposed to be a French librarian. It ended up being a French cat in Paris. This is me using Copilot for fun. So why did I join this community of practice? I think one of the reason is that our university is becoming a AI campus. We have a very important AI across the curriculum initiative. You cannot throw a stone at UF without hearing the word AI somewhere. And so I knew I had to learn about AI, and I thought this is timely, this is perfect, this is a moment for me. And the group setting, I think, was really a great motivator for me because I stepped up as associate chair in late 2023, and that has added a lot of work to my plate. And I have to admit that I am one of the person who didn't do all the readings in the group. So being in this group setting and be able to talk to other people really helped me actually learn more about AI. And also at the time, I was supervising with Tiffany and Lisa, and I wanted to show support as a supervisor and be part of what they were creating. I kept participating because it's way more fun to learn together, and it was finally something that we could do. I mean, I know we had the online Zoom, but we also had the T chat that were in person, and I do miss in-person meetings. I'm on Zoom constantly, and being able to be together and be able to have side conversations, that was really important to me. And discussion that we were having really led to deeper reflections on AI. I mean, I think, with Tiffany and Lisa have talked about all the different topics that we discussed. And I was just surprised to how much I was learning and how it really made me think about AI in our life. Um, in terms of key insights and lessons, um, it really also pushed me as a European studies librarian and as a French person to read more and learn more about how AI is being discussed in Europe. The regulations are very different from the US, so I've been trying to learn more about this. And also, we are being incited to develop our library collections on the topic of AI, and I've been trying to develop also sort of the European perspective too on that topic in our collection. It also made me think, so AI is the topic of the moment. I feel like every listserv I'm on, there's always a mention about AI. But for me, in my daily job, I haven't necessarily received a lot of questions about AI. And so, like, discussing with my colleagues about the type of question they're getting, the type of research they are doing. I was just thinking, like, how do we fill these questions as librarians? Like, it's so dependent on the questions we get on our fields. It was really interesting to learn about this. And finally, advice, if you want to join, first of all, you don't need to be an AI expert. And, just have an open mind, come ask questions. We're really good at asking questions, like ask all the questions that you need, participate in discussions, and enjoy the snacks. I mean, somebody in the chat wrote, right, if you bring free food, they'll come. Absolutely, 100%.
Hello, I am Sarah too, and I'm the final participant speaker here today. So I joined the community practice because, much like Hélène, I saw there was all this AI on campus. I felt like I needed to know more than I did, and I also felt kind of overwhelmed, and I didn't know where to start. And I really liked that this activity was well packaged, and the work that was the most overwhelming to me, which is finding these readings, creating a syllabus, setting a time, finding a dedicated place and time to like go in on this, was already done. And it was right there on the library training program, and I could just register for it, and I didn't have to go digging to find it. So that's why I joined. What kept me coming back were definitely the in-person meetings. I definitely participated in more of those than I did the Zooms. And I really liked meeting colleagues from a variety of departments. That's something that I think the community of practice helped build, like, rapport and morale, and I got to meet a lot of people, and I think that that still carries through now in every activity. I think it makes everybody more likely to join another community of practice or take another training program even. Yeah, it continues to benefit my work life here, having done this. And I also liked that it had a tight time frame in the spring semester, and that it had a finite start and date, and everything was scheduled for me. It allowed me to really prioritize the material because it was a short time. I knew I couldn't sustain that long term. I liked kind of going in on it rather than having a little bit for a longer time. Key takeaways for me were, I was really glad I did this this community of practice, because the readings really prepared me for an AI committee that I was kind of assigned to later in the year in the libraries. And I also felt the group discussions and the chance to kind of talk informally about AI really have helped me in this group that is a little bit of a more formal setting. And I'm glad it's not my first time trying to talk to colleagues about this. My advice to people interested in joining a community practice is to actively participate, bring your interests, bring your opinions, lean in, and connect through your own interests. The picture I have on here is A Summer Fling to the Extreme, which is a book written by ChatGPT and Smoothie King, with as a watermelon smoothie promotional. I was already reading this book before I joined the community of practice, so I brought in my copy, and we had some fun. We had a kind of lighthearted session exploring this book and smoothie recipes. And yeah, I like that. I felt like I really contributed to the community in that way, and I had something of value to bring. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. And so we have a reflection summary. I think that's for you, Tiffany. Sorry.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yep.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you everyone for sharing your experiences. And for those of you in the audience, I'm sure you can see that we found our experience was positive overall. And we generally struck a good balance between reading about different, theories and concepts related to AI literacy and the practice that we were bringing to our work every day. So a few takeaways we wanted to share with you. For facilitators, if you want to organize your own community of practice, Lisa and I want to emphasize that we encourage you to build something that works works for you. And there are many models out there, right? Like whether you have something existing that you want to incorporate a few elements into, or you want to build something from scratch, or you have multiple communities of practice and you want to figure out how this fits into that. It's all up to you. If you build it, we're positive that a few people will show up, especially if you have food. That's very important. And it might even connect you to other groups with similar interests. So we hope that you can use the reflections that we share here as a resource for your own context. Lastly, I just want to very quickly mention that we have a resources section in a few slides that will have a link to our slide deck. We also have a selected list of readings from our community of practice for you to explore right here. And we're happy to take any questions from the audience at this time. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you all. We had one question in the chat that Lisa answered, which somebody was wondering how long the sessions were. They were all an hour, both online and in person.
And there's been a follow-up to that question. What was the cadence? Was it monthly, weekly?
So we met every 2 weeks, either in person or online. And will we continue another? That's a great question. Yes, I love community of practice, but I know Tiffany's already joined some at UC Irvine. I know Sarah has mentioned the AI committee that actually both of us are on now. So I think this core group is continuing to keep each other informed and up to date. But I think for now, we're not going to continue this specific one. But I could see if we had the time, I would want to keep going. But I think sometimes that is a challenge. And actually that reading talks a lot about how to keep sustaining these communities of practice if that's something you're interested in doing. So with that, I think we are, oh, go ahead.
Oh, we have a few more questions. So how would you recommend finding one in your area? I think it really depends. At Irvine, we have what's called sort of research groups, communities of practice, and committees, and those are all kind of listed on our website. And like you have to apply for some of them. And the community of practice is the most informal one that you can just start on like Teams or Zoom or whatever you want. And so you might have places like that if you're on a college campus that might, facilitate these sorts of things. I'm always a fan of looking up like sort of events at your public library if that is, something you're able to do as well. Yeah, there's lots of ways to do that. And online spaces are good for that too.
Thank you. And since we were asked to finish on time, oh, and look, we have someone. Yes, I knew Dr. Nygren as well. Sorry, got sidetracked. But thank you all for joining our presentation. The recording will be made available online. The slides are in our institutional repository. The link is available. And thank you for coming. And I think you can stop the recording.